I'm Bill Morris with Habitat Magazine, and Kevin Bone, architects are constantly running into surprises in their work. And you were telling me that you were working on did a routine facade inspection on a newly built building, and you ran into some surprising things. Tell me about that.
This case I'm going to discuss with you today, Bill, is not totally unique. We have, over the course of 35 plus years of looking at New York City buildings, encountered a number of situations where relatively new construction shows some surprising problems. This particular case I'm going to tell you about today is a new building in the West 50s. It was designed by a reasonably high-end Manhattan architectural firm. It was built by a competent builder. It's a rather beautiful complex. It was built in 2008. We did the first facade inspection safety program inspections in 2018. At that time, we expected to find nothing more than pro forma inspection to verify that everything was in good shape. We were surprised to find out otherwise.
What did you discover? Was it faulty material, faulty construction, both?
It was a combination. The building was a unique exterior wall system called a rain screen, something that has become more popular in contemporary construction. They are a very good solution to exterior building envelopes. We have learned over decades of working on buildings that no building wall is waterproof. And the rain screen strategy basically says, let's keep as much water off the building wall as possible. And the real waterproofing happens deeper in the wall assembly. This particular rain screen was a high-tech cementitious panel system. So it's a kind of gray, generally looks like cement, flat, modern material that is bolted onto the wall assembly of the building. When we came on to do our facade inspections, we noticed that the corners of these panels were cracking off. And these falling chips from these panels posed a safety problem to the building. We did our inspections, we went back to the board and we reported on this. And I would describe the initial meeting as one of shock and anger.
It was not a happy co-op board.
It was not a happy condominium board. It was not a happy condo board. There was an initial denial. There was anger with the messengers, as there often is. We presented our evidence. We presented the best case we could to help them understand. There's a certain educational curve that has to take place. No one could believe that they had bought into this wonderful building, and there was a systemic fundamental flaw with something as important as the exterior envelope. We encouraged this board to seek a second opinion, as we often do. We are architects, we do our due diligence, we do our homework, but it's always good for the board to hear from someone else so that there's no suspicions that the architect has other motivations than absolutely presenting an accurate story, or perhaps that the architect even got it wrong, that it has happened, I suppose. So
did another firm corroborate your findings?
Well, the building went back and forth and ultimately decided it was not necessary. As they studied the problem, as they met with us periodically, they began to see what was going on. And as we got deeper into the problem and we began to understand why it was happening, I would say the anger and resistance continued for some time, but ultimately the board began to come around and understand that they were going to have to address this problem, and they began to organize themselves in such a way as to how do we best address this problem? What is this actually going to take? Are we going to do spot repairs on this, or is this a larger problem that we want to eliminate for the future so we're not coming back every 5 years to do a few more panels? And this kind of discourse went on, I would say, probably for maybe 8 months before ultimately a scope of work was settled on between the board and the consulting architects and the managing agents, who also played a critical role in advising the group.
How did they decide to proceed? Are they going to do the whole envelope and do it right
The
once?
building decided to do the whole envelope. The conclusion was that, you know, in a project like this, Bill, like, there are many costs that are involved, but the logistics, the general conditions, the scaffolding, the insurance, the mobilization, the inconvenience to the residents of the building, all of that is really big. And you don't want to be going through that every 5 years or every 7 years, as you have a little bit more of the problem coming forward. And once we had really learned that there was basically a design and execution flaw, exactly where that design and execution line was drawn is a complex matter, but fundamentally we knew that this problem would go on if we didn't address the larger underlying nature of how these panels were attached to the building and the panels themselves.
So once the board came around, what did they learn from the experience? I mean, was there a lesson for other boards that might be in a similar situation here?
Yes, I would say there are a couple of important lessons. Of course, there's also, depending on the age of the building, there is that cycle of discussions about seeking recourse. Do you go after the developer? Do you go after the professional team? Do you go after the builders? In this case, the timeline was such that was not such a realistic possibility. But one thing that I have learned, and I've done this on a number of new buildings that have really similar stories, where basically there was a system failure, that it's very important to have one plan that is about solving the physical problem and one plan that's about financial recourse, but do not tie the two together. I've seen this mistake made where boards say, okay, let's get our settlement and then we'll do the job. Because what happens then is you have a building that has a fundamentally flawed condition that is perhaps contributing to other problems in the building, is certainly contributing to a diminishment of value of the real estate if sidewalk bridges are constantly up and whatnot. So it's good to address the problem. Whatever financial recourse you may seek should be an independent question. I've seen that lesson a number of times.
So keep those two decisions separate.
Keep those two decisions separate. I always encourage buildings to think for the long term. There is a tendency to say, okay, let's solve this now, spend as little money as possible, and return to it. But these years go by pretty quickly. And to the degree that you can solve the problem well, I think that's very important. And we encourage
fix it once and fix it right, I guess, is what you're trying to say.
Right. Yes. Fix it right. It almost always pays to fix it right.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for that advice, Kevin Bone. And through hard experience, we appreciate you taking the time to talk.
All right. My pleasure, Bill. Look forward to speaking with you in the future.